Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Muriel and in this video I will be finally doing my review for season 1 of Amazon Prime's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I had very low expectations going into this show. I watched a fair few of the teasers, the trailers, and yeah, I didn't feel terribly confident about this show, but I figured that I was probably being a bit too much of a Debbie Downer, so yeah, I figured it would probably be alright, like Wheel of Time. Though, again, no offense to hardcore Wheel of Time fans, I know you all have also been massively burnt with that, so now I understand your pain. And, well, it was worse than I expected. Oh, my lordy, it was so bad. So I did actually watch the first 2 episodes they released, so the premiere episodes, when I was in London with my mother. Started watching it in bed, and she was right next to me in the hotel room, and I basically started nerdy screeching at all the things that were getting wrong about, you know, the first age law, and then afterwards the second age law, and I was just kind of losing my shit, and my mother thought this was hilarious. And unfortunately, things did not get better. There was severe law butchering in just the first 10 minutes of this first season, and it just kept on keeping on as the season unfolded. So first, a word about the visual quality of this show. A lot has been made and said about the visual quality of Rings of Power. Oh my god, the special effects. Oh my god, the panoramic shot. Oh my god, it's so pretty, it's so beautiful, it's so shiny. And yes, fine, it does have some merit when it comes to cinematography, though not always, and some visual effects. There's a beautiful shot of Valinor in the first episode. Our Menelaus in Numenor looked quite pretty, though the comparison to Assassin's Creed was kind of on point there. And things of that general nature. I mean, Khazad-dûm looked pretty as well. So I will give somewhat of a point for some of that cinematography, especially when it came to landscapes, to VFX settings, so like Khazad-dûm or Menelaus. Even Eregion looked quite pretty, especially towards the end. But despite those many locations, like even despite the traveling of the Harfeet, I felt there was a sense of smallness. That's even without considering the fact that geography didn't exist in the show, because like people were fast traveling fucking everywhere and there was no sense of distance at all. Because there was no sense of distance, actually yes it is related, there was no sense of grandeur you get, for instance, in the Peter Jackson movies, but even in something like Game of Thrones, in my opinion. It felt small. Way too small for something that is supposed to be reportedly adapting Legendarium literary material. In terms of the VFX for like smaller things, so creatures, magic, things like that. The magic I didn't have any issue with, there wasn't that much of it in any case. Randolph used some, the cultists used some, the fire and stuff, it was fine. Some of the creatures were alright to questionable, like the ice troll was fine. The Shiwawarg, nah, just fail. Straight up fail. To me, that thing was ridiculously funny, which is not something I want to get out of a warg, you know. I mean, the Balrog was well done. Didn't really have an excuse to fob that in, I might argue. But also, we just got, what, a minute of it and nothing. I guess they're saving that for season 2. But then you also have things like, I guess, more intimate types of cinematography, like interactions, or more specifically, fight choreographies. Even from my amateurish point of view, I suppose, a lot of the fighting looked terrible. I mean, terrible. Again, I am by no means a martial or military expert, like not at all, but I have picked up a few things here and there from the books I've read, from the movies I've seen. The fighting looked shite, especially where Gally, oh yes, Galadriel was concerned. And then even the couple battle scenes, that episode 6, I'm sorry, the battles were gobshite. And that's where a lot of things started really looking fake to me. Like, I felt this was basically a giant LARPing session. And once again, no offense to LARPers, they can actually do great things, but that's not what I want to see in a freaking super expensive Amazon adaptation, right? Like, that cavalry charge looked fake, and once again, small. And this comes down not so much to VFX, but also to things like props and costuming. The horses' harnesses, for instance, they just looked fake, made out of plastic. Again, I hate to bring them up, but that's kind of Amazon's fault since they blatantly plagiarized or attempted to plagiarize a lot of stuff. But the PJ movies, which are what, 20 years old now? I mean, they're not that recent, right? And they look 1,000 times better. They've aged very well. So given you have that to compare it to, and given it's much older, it just doesn't hold up. And this then affects the overall feeling of the grounder shots as well. So even though you do have some beautiful panoramas, it still feels small and it doesn't feel immersive. And that's a ginormous issue when we're talking about SFF specifically. And of course, a lot of world building is carried by the visual medium. Well, in cinema, obviously, you get descriptions in books in the source material, but then ideally, the whole point of adapting it to cinema, because I consider television to be, smaller scale cinema, it's all cinema to me. The point of it is to bring those things to visual life, but then they failed in so many places, either because things looked fake, so I'm thinking more in terms of props here, specifically props and costuming. You had a lack, as far as I'm concerned, of attention to details. And the devil, I'm sorry, is in the details, especially if you compare it to something, well, like Peter Jackson movies, or even Game of Thrones, or even freaking House of the Dragon. I will mention House of the Dragon just a wee bit at the end. Like, for instance, the runes on Gil-galad's cape. Why was an elven high king wearing runes? The lack of beards on the female dwarves. Again, sorry, not sorry to bring that up again, but given some of the other choices they went with, why no beads on the female dwarves? The rings themselves, the bloody rings of power, here the elven rings of power, they look like bling. They look like cheap bling. Like, how do you fund that so bloody hard in the show titled The Rings of Power? And even that's not so much a lack of attention to detail. It is in a way, but again, copy-pasting the PJ movies. Now, you can't on the one hand argue we're not trying to copy them, this is a new story in a new age, but then you're so blatantly trying to copy the PJ movies. Fine, you're trying to adapt the source material, so there would be commonality there. I wouldn't have minded commonalities like visual callbacks, but here it bled into fucking everything. The plotting, the cinematography, the fight scenes. And then, the Númenórean cavalry looked straight up like the Rohirrim. They did not look like Númenóreans. They did not look like their own culture and civilization. Yes, there were callbacks to Minas Tirith in Armenos, and that would make sense, but overall it was just a fail for me. I was very underwhelmed by the costuming. I'm not saying I'm super obsessed about it either, but I can definitely appreciate it when it's well done. Once again, if I compare it to something like House of the Dragon, there is simply no comparison. For things like period dramas, I also appreciate good, accurate costuming. I'm not saying it's always done, but I appreciate it. And here, the costuming was just so lackluster. First of all, I thought there was a lack of variety in the costuming. Most of the characters wore the exact same thing, episode after episode after episode after episode, in very different circumstances, which once again reinforces this lack of depth I felt, of three-dimensionality I felt is absolutely needed for something like this, for a story like this in a secondary fantasy world. I did generally enjoy Queen Muriel's outfits, her headpieces they weren't crowns, but you know what I mean. Gally did have one pretty green dress in the very last episode in Eregion, but beyond that, Celebrimbor wore the same exact outfit every single time. Elrond, same. I guess, yeah, the Númenóreans have their armor, but the armor looked cheap. And again, it's this lack of attention to detail. Gally had chainmail covering this spot of the body, which is very, very vulnerable because there's a major artery there. But, Elendil had cloth. And not even like padded leather, just straight up plushy cloth. That would get you killed on the battlefield, or the lack of helmets, and on and on and on it goes. And then the half-feet were dirty bums. Why should they have had to be dirty bums with the acorns and flowers and hay in their hair? They had access to running water they never washed. Just why? And then, of course, speaking of props in the hair, I'm sorry, but again, not sorry, I'm going to bring up the fucking haircuts again. The elves did not look like elves. And that to me is a ginormous, once again, problem for the fucking Legendarium, which have, I guess, kind of an OG version of fantasy elves, of, the high elves, so derived from Norse mythology, essentially, from Alfheim and things like that. They did not look like elves. They did not look ethereal, kind of otherworldly. They're still humanoids. Like, they're not gods. They're not angels, because there are actual gods in the Legendarium's world. But they still should not look like pointy-eared humans, which is what they essentially look like. If you compare it once again, I'm sorry, not sorry, to the Peter Jackson movies. Some of those haircuts were atrocious. Were basically haircuts lifted from the 21st fucking century, especially for the men. The faded haircuts, the buzz cuts, just hell to the fuck no. Elrond's haircut also, I mean, it wasn't a haircut, but like a hairstyle with way too much hair gel. I was like, where do elves get their hair gel? They must have a sweet as fuck contract with hair salons, and same with Celebrimbor, and on it goes. The dwarves were probably the least bad in that respect, but it's just not good enough. Moving on to the music, OSTs are very important to me in cinema and in video games as well. I don't have too many negative things to say about the OST as such. I don't really think it felt that Legendarium-y, but it was okay. It definitely doesn't live up to Howard Shore's score, which is classical at this point. It's majestic. But there were some nice tunes, fair enough. I'm not trying to say the composer's bad in any case, but I just didn't think it fit the material so well. I remarked pretty quickly that some notes reminded me of the Foundation score, and wouldn't you know, it was the same composer, so I was like, nice for me, I have a good year, don't I? But some notes also reminded me of Harry Potter, and I mean, I love the Harry Potter score, John Williams for the win, am I right? Mostly, didn't do every single movie, but you know, but that's not what I want to think of when I'm watching something based off of, you know, Legendarium written material. Now, a harsh item of criticism in relation to the music. So the music itself was fine. It was pretty sure, but I just didn't think it really fit the material. However, it was overused. I thought there were way too many moments that could have benefited from silence or just background noise or, you know, landscape noises, forest noises, etc. There was way too much dramatic music, especially in conjunction with slow motion, which I forgot to talk about in the cinematography section, but quick note about that. A weird excess of slow motion. Yes, looking at you, weird as fuck, and honestly uncanny valley creepy galley horse riding scene in Numenor. What was that? But so yes, too much slow motion, and then in conjunction with that, too much dramatic music. But even then, it was just all the time, non-stop. It needed to breathe a bit. Sometimes silence is way more effective to deliver an emotional punch. And then a quick note about what I call the intro montage, so that montage for the intro credits. Underwhelming. I mean, again, my bar is set pretty freaking high with the Game of Thrones one, but I mean, even the one for Foundation, I preferred to this. Even the one for Wheel of Time, actually, kind of. Now, I read, after having seen it, that it is meant to be a little nod to the Ainu Lindalie from the Silmarillion, which is basically the musical creation of Ada, of the Legendarium's world, by the big honcho god and his demiurges. I mean, I didn't get it on my own, so maybe that's, you know, a fault of mine. And I appreciate the intent, but since I didn't really get that, and since I basically hated everything else about the show, you know, it just didn't land for me. So a quarter point for the intent, the idea behind it, but the execution, obviously, to me, wasn't good enough. It's just a bit meh. Okay, so basically it's the sound waves, the sounds, the music of creation, causing vibrations, and that's what's moving the particles around, the particles being molecules and atoms and stuff, perhaps, you know, symbolically. But again, that score just felt underwhelming for me. Again, for something meant to be based off of legendary material. The acting was also very underwhelming to bad. The best performance by far for me was Adar's. So, I mean, the actor who plays Adar, and this is the actor who plays Benjen Stark in Game of Thrones and then Cold Hands. He was a convincing character, and his was a convincing performance. I did like Elendil at first, and then I just couldn't care anymore. I liked Arondir at first as well, but then that kind of dropped off as well. Elrond, no. I'm not saying this is the fault of the actor, but this portrayal of Elrond, I just wanted to slap him every time he came on screen. The Stranger, I just was so annoyed by the whole mystery box bullshit around him. I couldn't care. The dwarves were alright. The parts with the dwarves were my least loathed. Bronwyn, I did not care about. Queen Muriel, I did not care about. Isildur, just whatever. The Harfy, just no. Again, it's not so much that their performances were bad, but it pissed me off. the whole thing with the half-eat. And Celebrimbor, I wasn't particularly convinced. Gil-galad either. And then we have Halbrand / Sauron. I guess his performance was alright, all things considered, but given he's supposed to be Sauron and given the whole thing with that, again, it just tainted everything. I couldn't really appreciate the acting performance on its own, if you get what I mean. And then, of course, huge, bloody, angry elven woman in the room, Galadriel, our good old dear Gally. I mean, I don't think her acting was good. I don't know if that's because of the actress herself, or if this is an issue with the direction. If she was just following what she was being told by the director and the showrunners, that's kind of an open question. But the performance I got off screen was just not good, because she just had two emotions, pissed off and pissed off upset. There was no range there. And then we come to the character work itself, but I mean, it's tied to the acting and the wider world building or lack thereof, and the craptastic adaptational quality of this train wreck. The dwarves. Okay, the half-eat, just get the fuck out of my field of vision, you creepy little dirty bum psychos. The stranger, I guess the stranger was alright, but it's fucking Rebek Gandalf, and I'm like not about that at all. I mean, you did have those cultists, but who cared about those knockoff ring wraiths, if I got that right? You have the whole Sauron and his girlfriend, or Gally and her boyfriend, and their love-to-hate trope relationship, and that makes Sauron go full evil. Kill me now. So that was atrocious. Elrond, supposed to be a diplomat, cunning politician. Celebrimbor, the amazing smith who wasn't an amazing smith, who was kind of a thick moron about smithing. Gil-galad was kind of a non-entity. And then the Númenórean crew. Oh, you did have Farri. I guess Farri was kind of alright. Kind of accurate to the source material, sort of. You had Arryn, who gives a fuck. Isildur was kind of a knob. I'm sorry, but yeah, he's not dead. You all know he's not dead, but who cares? Queen Muriel was also kind of stuck up a bit. Bronwyn and Arondir, I did like Arondir at the beginning. I thought he was a fairly elvish elf, but then that kind of went away. Potato Creep was the real MVP. Good on him. And you had Adar. Adar, who was the baddie, but the baddie with heart. So maybe he was my favorite character. Hashtag Team Adar is actually the good guy here. And then that brings me to the plotting. Just so much egregious, stupid. Oh my god. Just so much nonsense. Retconning of their own plot. 3-4 episodes in, no continuity whatsoever, ginormous gaps in logic simply not existing here. Like I said, the lack of geography, that's more an issue with the world building than the plotting, but I'll still throw it in because why not? Just things happening because they have to. MacGuffins, like that evil sword thingy that was a key that, you know, made Mount Doom explode and created Mordor. The whole revealing Mordor in a PowerPoint presentation. Finrod's shiv being necessary to forge the Rings of Power. Just plot convenience after plot convenience after plot convenience. The whole Silmaril essence in the Mithril will vaccinate the elves against soul death. And then the plot kind of starting and stopping a few times, so they're going to leave Númenor and go to war in Middle-earth like over 2 or 3 episodes. And then, you know, Halbrand is like, 1 minute, I'll be king of the Southlands, then nah, I kind of want to be a smith, then no, you know what, yeah, I'll totally be king of the Southlands. Then Gally identifying him as king of the Southlands, then rechecking when she gets doubts. But the doubts she gets, she actually heard from Adar, not from Halbrand, yet she asks Celebrimbor, did Halbrand tell you this? I was like, we're not that stupid, mates. We're not that thick. This doesn't make sense. And then she rechecks the records and she's like, oh my god, my boyfriend is not who he said he was. Gally being an abject moron and jumping off that boat, and then later saying that no, she was kind of convinced that she wasn't worthy of going to Valinor. No, you thought you had to touch the darkness first, and then you thought you could swim that far away because you thought you were Gally Phelps, and just on and on and on. Pointless drama because they needed something to fill in the minutes, I guess, and just CW tier drama too. The pointless, I mean, not that pointless ultimately because that's what makes Sauron go evil, but so the semi-pointless romance between Gally and Sauron, the pointless romance between Kevin, Farri's son, and Arryn, who no one cared about, kind of introducing a romance between Miri and Elendil, I guess, fake out Bess, which annihilated any and all stakes you could potentially have in this show. Also revealing that the fall of Numenor will happen 4 episodes in, so a major climax of the show you just fucking nuked in the water right there. Because, I mean, I don't know why, you tell me. Finally, the lore butchering. Is this an adaptation? You all know that Rings of Power is not an adaptation in any way, shape, or form. It is some vague, shitty fanfiction of elements you find in Tolkien's Legendarium. So characters, or their names at least, and plot points, world-building elements, and that is it. It does not respect the Legendarium's timeline, it does not respect its world-building, its deep lore, even some of its theming really, because the whole thing with the elves are not really immortal, and the Silmaril being a vaccine for them, and Halbrand becoming Bat Sauron because his girlfriend rejected him. Just what the fuck is this? This is not Tolkien. You may not like Tolkien's themes, but then why the fuck would you adapt his material is what I don't understand. And actually another note about the script writing, the writing in general, the amount of dumb as fuck aphorisms they threw into this thing. Clearly they were trying to emulate Tolkien's writing style, which is a specific prose style, to be fair, not everyone likes it. And they were trying so hard, you could tell, to be deep. They were not being deep. They were being superficial and fucking stupid. The sea is always right. Yay! A dog may bark at the moon but may not bring it down. Yay! Where there is light, there can only be love or some shit, and then just Elendil going on about the fact the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Again, is the assumption here that the audience is thick? Because that's the vibe I got. To list off the most egregious instances of lore butchering, I mean, the whole intro to the show really of just fucking up the first age lore with, well, the war for the Silmarils, really. The whole, the king decides who goes back to Valinor, fuck off. The whole Gally actually was married to Celeborn and then she just didn't fucking care that he disappeared, fuck off. The whole Silmaril-infused Mithril, fuck off. The whole Numenor hates the elves because they're gonna take our gerbs, fuck off. And on it goes. Just, how do you just disrespect another person's creation so much is my question. A couple more items of things that pissed me off, regardless of the adaptational quality or, you know, lack thereof. This whole obsession with mystery boxes. Who is Sauron? Woo! It's fucking Halbrand, we got it. Who is Gandalf? Ooh! It's fucking Randolph, we got it. The Forging of the Rings of Power was just so bloody underwhelming. Like, that's your climax for season 1, really? Hi. And also just whipping out the Balrog and then doing nothing with it. Just the way Mordor is created and Mount Doom is created with the whole fucking pyroclastic flow incident. That was just, why? Just, no. No, I know it's fantasy, but there are no stakes. Like, if everyone can survive that, then no one dies, right? Like, there's no justification for killing any character that can survive that cataclysmic of a volcanic eruption, even in a fantasy setting. It's like, come on, I can't take that fucking seriously, though. And then, again, the whole, I'm gonna become evil now, and, you know, just a Dark Lord, because my girlfriend, she was mean, and she broke up with me. Sniff. Are you for fucking real? Seriously? Also, it kind of makes me laugh that a lot of actresses came out with a bit about female empowerment being represented in Rings of Power, okay, and a lot of dude bros lost their shit over the supposed feminism of Galadriel. Have you been smoking, mates? In what universe is this feminist? It just has nothing to do with that, because Galadriel is an insult to memorable female literary characters as far as I'm concerned. And having a woman basically being responsible for the Dark Lord, just, it was a choice. Not a feminist one by any means, but and okay, let's conclude on Galadriel. Galadriel is probably the one the Silmaril thing was just egregiously bad though, so it's kind of a tie. Also, I didn't see Ungoliant. I'm still very sad about that, but okay, fine, minor thing. I mean, Numenor being pissed at the elves because they took her gerbs. Oh, there was so much shit in the show, though. So, but still, Galadriel, Gally, the genocidal and sadistic psychopath, who is a shit wife as well. I mean, I thought the character butchering in season 8 of Game of Thrones was bad, and don't get me wrong, it was atrocious. Who Gally? That, or who Gally? Oh my fucking god. That was And this is in season 1 too, mind you. I guess they could improve in following seasons, but I'm like, this is your version of Galadriel. Okay, cool, but I'm not gonna follow on with this bullshit. Oh, hell no. And lest I be accused of just being a butthurt nerd, let me give you the opinions of both of my parents, because we all watched this train wreck of a show and we all hated it. My mother is not a Tolkien nerd. She's not even an SFF nerd by any means, though she did like Game of Thrones until it, jumped off a cliff, and she loved the Peter Jackson trilogy. My father has read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. He adores The Lord of the Rings as a novel, and he adores the Peter Jackson movie. So, varying levels of SFF Tolkien nerdiness, or Legendarium nerdiness. My mother thought that the acting was wooden, especially that Gally had no range, like I myself stated. She thought that the script writing was absolutely appalling, and we exchanged many jokes along the lines of "the sea is always right, Freyend!" So that was actually fun, so I'll give Rings of Power that. She absolutely hated the haircuts, just like me. She thought that, they were basically an ad for L'Oreal for men, which was kind of my point as well, and especially that Celebrimbor looked like a banker from the city in London. Her main gripe, however, was that the way the show was articulated, you had a beautiful set, grandiose music, and basically the plot was built around it to showcase said set and music, and so that meant that the plot itself was completely empty. She also thought there was no logic or consistency in the timeline or plot, that it was very obvious that there was a blatant lack of experience on the part of the scriptwriters, and that this show generally was a blatant rip-off of the Peter Jackson movies, which she does love, like I said, and also she couldn't with the Half-Feet either. She just thought they were psychos, and she thought it was fucking ridiculous that they always had stuff in their hair, like acorns or hay. And then my dad, so who's a big lover of The Lord of the Rings, the novel, and the Peter Jackson movies, he thought it was a great disappointment, that it was very obvious there was a deep lack of professionalism, especially given the money invested in this project, that basically as a show it was not engaging or engrossing. He did admit there were a few nice set designs, and I do agree with that, but the whole thing felt just overall very amateurish, a bit like, the way he put it, a neighborhood theater group production. I mentioned LARPing, well, his reference is neighborhood theater, and in his opinion, as decent Lord of the Rings nerd, this is not Tolkien at all. There is nothing of the spirit of Tolkien or the Legendarium in this show, and to him, the only positive is that we got to see an amazing Olympic performance by Gally Phelps, just swimming! And so I'll conclude on a very brief comparative note to House of the Dragon. Now, as of now, I haven't actually finished House of the Dragon because I've been otherwise occupied, but oh my god, the difference. House of the Dragon beats Rings of Power on every possible fucking metric, putting aside that they are very different stories. That is true. Game of Thrones and the Legendarium as a whole, or I mean, A Song of Ice and Fire and the Legendarium, different stories with different kinds of characters, character arcs, themes, etc., etc. I'm not disputing that, but if you put that aside, just production value, plotting, script writing, character work, acting, costuming, set design, House of the Dragon beats Rings of Power on every single one of those metrics as far as I'm concerned. Just absolutely no question about it, and it is all the more remarkable given the train wreck of Game of Thrones Season 8. So my rating for Season 1 of Amazon Prime's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, maybe if I'm being generous, a 2.5 out of 10. Yes, it might sound harsh, but I do love the Legendarium. It is an all-time favorite in the genre of fantasy and in literature in general, and I do care about it, and I care about good adaptations of SFF. I wonder actually if bad adaptations, hokey, pulpy adaptations of SFF isn't one of the reasons the genre, or the super genre in this case, isn't taken that seriously. It's because of shit like this, partly. And I'm like, no, I'm not about that. I'm not gonna praise that just because, oh, it's just fantasy, it's just an adaptation, just don't be such a sourpuss, just fuck off. No, I thought it was pathetic. It's an atrocious non-adaptation, and beyond that, it is not a good TV show so far, in any case. If it was completely divorced from the Legendarium, perhaps I could bump it up to a 3.5 to 4 out of 10, maybe? But again, I am not going to give a pass to fucking Amazon over this. They chose to put The Lord of the Rings in their fucking series title, and they chose to put in their intro credits based off of some of J.R.R. Tolkien's writings. That is a bazillion% on them, and I will judge them for this. That being said, to end on a more positive note, a couple of more positive notes, I will link to a video I watched, a glorious video made by a Legendarium nerd that goes into how he would have made a TV show out of the Legendarium Second Age, and it is absolutely brilliant. He incorporates linguistics in a magnificent way as well. He does play around with time jumps, and as we've seen with House of the Dragon, you can make time jumps work. So please do go check that out if you're interested. And also, right after this video wraps up, I will show you all a few pieces of fan art I commissioned years ago from this lovely Brazilian artist, and I will leave a link to her Instagram in the description box down below if you want to go check her work out. I don't know if she takes commissions anymore today, but she is a lovely human being, a lovely artist, and I commissioned also, you know, original character art from her. But so yes, I also commissioned a few pieces of fan art of a few of the ladies you find in the Silmarillion. So a bit of positivity linked to the Legendarium to counter the trash of Rings of Power. If you want to share your thoughts, feelings, what have you about Season 1 of Rings of Power, you're more than free to do so in the comments down below or on my Discord server. There is now a permanent link for it, also in the description box down below. I wish you all a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for joining me on my deep dive, some of you. Thank you for the continued support, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in another video. Bye-bye.